Ayatollah Khamenei tweeted almost every day, "Death to Islam."
I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump claims that Iran reached out to the White House for talks.
Now, for the first time, he said that he may go ahead with a dialogue, but once again did not confirm any decision. He added that there is a big difference between talking now versus 1 week ago.
Got a ways to go. They should have, look, they should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it. And they want to meet, but it's, you know, it's a little late to meet, but they want to meet, and they want to come to the White House. They'll even come to the White House. So we'll see. I may do that, but it's a shame it could have been done the easy way.
Now, the president declined to answer reporters' questions on whether the U.S. was planning to strike Iran and its nuclear facilities. He also doubled down against Iran's nuclear ambitions, saying that the country cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Well, I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one. And they had to sign a document. I think they wish they signed it now. It was a fair deal. And now it's a harder thing to sign, you know. It's a lot of water over the dam. But, you know, it's very, I say it very simply. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Too much devastation. And they'd use it. You know, I believe they'd use it. Others won't use it, but I believe they'd use it. So that's it. It's very simple as far as I'm concerned. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
Meanwhile, Iran has denied any negotiations with the White House. Iran's mission to the U.S. in New York said that no Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House. It added that Iran does not negotiate under duress and shall not accept peace under duress.
Now, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned Trump of U.S. involvement in its conflict with Israel. He said that the damage to the United States will be far greater than any challenge Iran will counter. He also said that Iran will not surrender under threats.
And well, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Professor James A. Russell from Washington, D.C. He is an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs and an expert on U.S. foreign policy. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin by what Trump has said. He said, I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. Interesting statement there. We don't know if he knows what to do, but a Wall Street Journal report has claimed that Trump has told staffers that he has approved plans to strike Iran. What do you think he would actually do? Would Congress approve of it if he goes forward? And what is Trump actually thinking about right now?
Well, of course, it's a mystery to all of the above. I've been a national security professional for 35 years, and I can tell you it's a terrifying prospect. Listening to a president muse like that incoherently about going to war with another country, the size of Iran, a country of 90 million people, on spurious grounds, by which I mean, of course, Trump claimed in this interview that he thought that Iran was weeks away from having a nuclear weapon, when his own director of national intelligence has testified before the Congress that the assessment from the intelligence community is that Iran does not have an active nuclear weapons program underway. You get the sense that there's no real deliberative process going on inside the White House to develop coherent options. And this is not all that surprising, because the president has surrounded himself with people who are not subject matter experts. He's given them their jobs because they're loyal to him. So you don't have a great depth of knowledge about the region. You don't have a great depth of knowledge about proliferation issues. And frankly, Trump is showing his inexperience in this kind of sort of confrontation that we have unfolding. You kind of get the feeling that his whim is determined by the last person that he's talked to about this, which in this case is Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been beating the drum for a succession of American presidents over the last 25 years that Iran is on the verge of obtaining a nuclear weapon. It wasn't true 25 years ago, and it's not true today, according to our own intelligence community. So, it also kind of demonstrates the vacuum of strategic thinking in the United States writ large in the foreign policy community, who seem to sort of believe that a bomb of some sort is going to solve this complicated strategic and political problem. And that's not the case. You cannot bomb Iran's nuclear program out of existence. I don't care how big the bomb is. It's impossible. Does the president have people around him that are giving him this advice? I wonder. I have to wonder about that. So we get to watch the president just sort of making things up as he goes along in these one-offs with the press corps, and it's frankly terrifying. Because believe you me, sorry, let me stop there.
No, please continue, sir.
Well, no. What I want to say is that the day that American bombs start falling on Iran is the day that the United States is at war with Iran, and of course, the foreign policy establishment in the United States, some of whom, of course, are working in the Trump administration, are all, sort of believing that it's just a matter of America's good weapons and our good tactics and our trained pilots, and we're so good and the enemy is, not as good as us. And we've just finished a quarter century of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, in which our military, the best trained, best equipped military in the world, left with its tail between its legs. $8 trillion later, hundreds of thousands of civilians killed. And what did the United States achieve? And we seem to have learned nothing from this experience. But yet we still have those who are arguing that America's powerful bombs and our accurate weapons are going to solve this complex political problem. It's a complex political and strategic problem. And America and the foreign policy establishment, as exemplified by Trump, have no earthly idea how to think their way through this problem. This calls for deft diplomacy. It calls for a president who is actually willing to stand up to the Israelis, and we haven't had that.
Right.
Certainly not in recent history. It's the Israelis who are calling the shots in America's foreign policy and strategy in the Middle East. And there were those of us, of course, in this business that thought President Trump was finally going to have a policy that was America first in the Middle East, and it hasn't been the case. He's continued to just stand by and watch the slaughter in Gaza.
Right.
He stood by and watched Netanyahu launched the war against Iran, and now he's musing on whether or not he should, quote unquote, join in.
Professor Russell, Professor Russell, I remember we were speaking initially when Operation Rising Lion was launched as well, and you made some very insightful points there as well, which were really helpful in the discussions that we were having from, of course, experts from across the globe. And I remember clearly that you said certain things which really stood out. One, as you mentioned today as well, you cannot simply bomb Iran's nuclear program out of existence. Secondly, that Trump is perhaps not able to resist the pressure and is taking the bait that is being dangled in front of him by Netanyahu. That being said, you also mentioned today that we've seen these claims over and over again. If we go back, we can see such claims perhaps every single year in 2018, 16, perhaps 2005 even, you said that as well. That being said, this has been used as a pretext for the strikes, of course we know that. This essentially would imply that this is a complete dismantling of the preemptive defensive model in West Asia. And to get to that, I would also want to understand what your perspective on perhaps the regional proxies being involved in this is.
Well, These are, of course, great questions, and your viewers are lucky to have such informed commentators providing them with these kinds of insights. I would say that the proxies, in terms of the proxies, that they are less of an issue in a situation like this. What we're talking about here are wars between nation states, and in the Middle East, Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf region, whatever you want to call it. Iran is one of the oldest countries in the region, one of the oldest countries in the world. They have a strong national identity, a strong sense of purpose. And I don't think the United States has the faintest idea of what it would be coming up against should it decide to go down this path of, again, joining in on these strikes. Now, we can expect, of course, that one of the things that the Iranians have shown themselves to be very adept at over the last 15 to 20 odd years is mobilizing proxies when the fighting starts. So if we were to enter a wider war, the United States could expect involvement with all kinds of different groups, paramilitary groups, which the Iranians, of course, have energized. But at its core, this would be a contest between nation states, and we cannot underestimate the gravity of a war like this, which would suck in the region. I know the Gulf state Arabs are anxious that the Iran nuclear program would go away, but they want it done peacefully. They do not want to see a war. And I hope that they are bending the president's ear to try to convince him of this. I just wish I thought that we had a sort of, again, deliberative policy process in place to provide the president with the kinds of options that he needs to get diplomacy back started, because there's no military solution to the problems of Iran's nuclear program. There is no military solution. There's two forks in the road here facing the United States, one of which involves a long and debilitating war with a country of 90 million people, a war that we cannot win short of using nuclear weapons. And does anybody think that we would use nuclear weapons? I mean, it's impossible to contemplate.
Exactly.
And yet the second choice is the obvious one. It's to engage in diplomacy, get Iran back into the framework of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and go from there. The problem with all of this, of course, is that Israel does not want a political settlement to this issue. They are determined to pursue military options, as they have everywhere else in the region. Israel sees its military power as the solution to all its political and strategic problems. And it has, regrettably, I think, gotten the United States, particularly in the neoconservative elements of American foreign policy, signed on to this idea.
Right, and I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but that's also interesting because we don't know if Israel can actually go on and try to, sustain all of this, knowing that it is already in a war in Gaza. People are still dying in Gaza, and he wants to open another front. On that part, you've talked about diplomacy. A lot of European leaders are trying to get into this and saying that, okay, you know what, let us suggest a deal. We want to work this out. Russia, on its part, is also saying, and it's very interesting, he just made a statement saying that when he was asked if Iran has asked for support, he said, we have 200 Russian workers. They're currently employed at the Bushehr nuclear power plant in southern Iran, and we are not leaving. Is that not support? Now, Putin has said that there is a solution to this, a diplomatic solution, where Iran gets a nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment, and then we also have, global peace. Do you think leaders like Putin can actually bring about mediation? If not, then what kind of diplomacy would actually work this whole conflict out?
Well, the first part of the political problem has been created, of course, by the Israeli attacks. And as the Iranian supreme leader said, his country is not going to be negotiating as the bombs are falling around it. The first thing that what leader would do this? I mean, you see Vladimir Zelensky doing the same thing in Ukraine. He says, I'm not going to sit down and negotiate with my enemies as they're blowing up my cities and killing my citizens in their apartments, and so on and so forth, all over the country. It's not a circumstance where any political leader would feel comfortable engaging in diplomacy. However, what I would say is, apropos of your point about Putin, and this regrettably was the whole sort of issue with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This is the deal that Obama administration put together, which is that you've got to have the Russians, the Chinese, the Europeans, all of these countries, again, the permanent members of the Security Council, involved in a settlement. And the outlines of the settlement seem relatively clear. Iran agreed to intrusive inspection and verification measures in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And the sort of sticking point seems to be that whether Iran should retain enrichment capabilities. And of course, as a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is entitled to enrich uranium, provided, that enrichment activity is monitored appropriately by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So the deal, so to speak, that Trump keeps talking about, and again, these words just flow off of his mouth, and you have to wonder if he realizes what he said. These same things about ending the war in Ukraine, and he seemed to think, oh, this was going to be easy, and all I have to do is come into office and I'll be able to accomplish this easily. These are complicated problems. and the Iran nuclear program is a complicated problem, and it needs dedicated professionals. But essentially, the deal is all the elements that we know of are in place. They were in place in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, included by the Obama administration, and there has to be another version of the same sort of thing. That's the answer to this.
All right, Professor Russell, thank you so much for joining us. You're right. For now, at least, it seems that the United States seems to just be winging it, and there isn't really much clarity on what's really going to happen. That's something that remains to be seen. As always, it's a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.